Hello, Garland Nixon here. And as we look at 28-point plans and reactions from Europe and the US, we have to ask ourselves who's really at war here? Let's talk. Hello, Garland Nixon here, and we've talked about the 28-point plan and all of this kinds of stuff. And I think it's time we talk about something different. We're talking because everybody's discussing this, the relationship between the United States and Russia. I think that's well established. Let me before we get going, read something that I think is critical to understand where we are here. Now, there were something that I've talked about a lot. Warring factions within the U.S. empire, right? There were people saying, well, we need to get out. There were people saying, no, we need to double down. There was Keith Kellogg and I'm sure Rubio and these traditional neocons saying, no, let's keep doing what we're doing. And it appears to me that I would say most likely Trump and J.D. Vance was the other faction that was saying, Trump being caught between a rock and a hard place, the devil in the deep blue sea here regarding Ukraine. And J.D. Vance is clearly taking his position saying, look, let's get out. I think, my opinion, could be wrong. This is my opinion. Vance was like, we need to get out. And so there was these warring factions, right? There's the Tucker Carlsons of the world. There's the different people who are probably like, we need to get out, who are very, very realistic about this thing, who weren't living in a fantasy world. Well, I think, as we've discussed on this channel, these things that are going on are driven by the facts on the ground. I've said for a while, the Europeans and the neocons have a narrative and the Russians have artillery. And if you ask me, who am I going to bet on? Narrative versus artillery. I'm taking artillery every time. I'm going to say, well, that's great. You've got the BBC and Reuters and the Washington Post, and you're going to have all kind of articles, and it's going to sound great. And the Russians have artillerymen. And artillery's coming in and it's going to tear people to pieces. Artillery's going to win over a narrative every time. It's there. That was I actually posted like a meme or kind of a joke, although it's a, very, very, I'm not proud of it, a while back, where I basically said, there's a couple of Ukrainian soldiers on the front line. They're surrounded by the Russians. There's artillery falling everywhere. And they're like, oh my God, we're doomed. And they send a message back to Kiev and says, hey guys, we're surrounded. There's artillery falling everywhere. It looks like we're not going to make it. Things are looking bleak. And they got a message back from Ukraine, from their headquarters that said, yeah, fair enough. Things are looking bad on the front line. But the good news is, we're winning we're winning the PR war, and we just we've got more tweets on Twitter, we've got more trolls, we're beating the heck out of them, we're trending right now, so we think we're going to win the narrative war. Unfortunately, you won't be here to see it. Right now, I'm paraphrasing what I said, but you get my point. It comes back to narrative versus reality, and the Russians have always lived in this reality. So let me read what J.D. Vance said, and let's get going. And this is critical. Other people are talking about, we're going to pick it to pieces and we're going to talk about the real war now. And that's the Civil War, the real war, the war between the United States, the people in the U.S. who want the hell out of that mess. They may want other messes. That's another discussion, but they want the hell out of that mess. And the neocons who are saying, we got to keep going no matter what. J.D. Vance, his faction currently has won. We'll see how that works out. J.D. Vance's tweet. Any Ukraine-Russia peace plan has to, and this is critical when you're evaluating the 28-point plan, right? So there's this 28-point plan, and you can look at it, and you can say, I don't like this or that, but here's what he says. It has to, number one, stop the killing while preserving Ukrainian sovereignty. Well, yeah, kind of. But the issue is, what does Ukrainian sovereignty look like? He doesn't define Ukrainian sovereignty. Ukrainian sovereignty may very well mean, and it could be, they get the little rump state that's left. They get Lvov. There you go. Ukrainian sovereignty. We haven't defined Ukraine. Number two, and this is important, be acceptable to both Russia and Ukraine. Well, you know what? when you're laying on the floor and some guy has his foot on your neck, the peace plan that may not be acceptable to you when you were standing up fighting may start looking better. So here's the important part. Acceptable to Russia. Again, that negates the argument that the U.S. is going to try to push through things in that 28-point plan that Russia won't accept. He said, makes it clear. We'll talk about this more, and we can quabble about that. Number 3, maximize the chances that the war doesn't restart. Well, I'll put it to you like this. It shows that he understands that the Russians are not playing footsie this time, that the Russians are not going to say, you sit down and we'll come back and finish this later and the blah, 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 maximize the chances that the war doesn't restart. Well, he's still getting there. He hasn't got there because the Russians are saying, we will make sure. You're talking about maximizing it. We'll make sure that the war doesn't restart because we'll smash this thing to pieces so there ain't nothing to restart, right? So it puts the Ukrainians and the EU in a position of saying, take it or leave it. So the Russians are going to maximize the chances that the war doesn't start. It can't restart. I'll put it to you like this. If you ever saw The Matrix and the guy was talking about Neo and he says, you're not the one. You know why? Because you can't be the one if you're dead, right? Well, that's the Russian position. You know what? The Ukrainian army can't restart a war if there ain't no Ukrainian army, right? So let's continue. Let's read what he says. Every criticism of the peace framework the administration is working on, okay, so he's talking to the Europeans now and to the, the neocons here, but I think this is aimed at Zelensky and the Europeans. Every criticism of the framework the administration is working on either misunderstands the framework, okay, or misstates some critical reality on the ground, the second being the issue. Yeah, misstates, don't misstate, whatever, but what they're starting to say is what the Russians said way back. The final solution here, resolution, has to accept the realities on the ground. And he's saying, you misstate some critical reality on the ground, meaning, look, they got you on the ground and their foot is on your neck. You ain't got no cards, bruh. You got no cards. You got to accept that you got no cards. You can't keep saying, you may have me on the ground and your foot is on my neck, but doggone it, I will not accept no for an answer. Well, then they're going to smush your neck, aren't they? Here he says, and this is important, there is a fantasy, and that's the issue, that the Europeans are living in a fantasy or a narrative, that if we just give more money, more weapons, and more sanctions, victory is at hand, right? There you go. That ends it all. That is the most critical thing there. This is what the Russians have been saying. This is what I've been saying. This is what Ray McGovern, Scott Ritter, Larry Johnson, Judge Knapp. This is what we've been saying. Oh, we just give them a few more this and that. If only we give them a few more wonder weapons, everything will be fine. If we sign another agreement, some whatever, some more weapons, he says there is a fantasy, right? Or more sanctions. That's right. We got 20,000 sanctions. Let's make it 20,001, right? Peace won't be made by failed diplomats or politicians living in a fantasy land. He uses the word fantasy twice. He's talking to the Europeans. It might be made, I like that, by smart people living in the real world. In other words, we might get a deal with the Russians, maybe, if the Russians are in a good mood. If the Russians are in a charitable mood. Even then, guys, so here's what he says. Look, the Russians are going. The Russians got to say, because they're winning, you need to stop living in a fantasy world. No more money, no more sanctions, no more nothing. And last but not least, we maybe will get a deal, maybe not, but only if we live in the real world. So what is he saying? Let's go back to the very beginning. December of 2021. The Russians send a document to NATO, to the U.S. But the Russians say back then, we ain't going to talk to the organ grinder. We're going to talk, we ain't going to talk to the monkey. We're going to talk to the organ grinder. That's George Galloway's words. That's my words. What they actually said is we're going to talk to the puppeteer, not the puppets. They said that. I think Lavrov said those exact words or somewhere real close, right? In the very beginning, the Russians knew what time it was. The very beginning, they said, why are we talking to the Europeans? They remembered Victoria Nuland saying, F the EU. They knew damn good and well that when it came down to it, if we use Trump's negotiation terms, which are very accurate, do you have cards to play or you don't? You ain't in the game if you don't have a hand, and the Russians don't have and the Europeans don't have a hand. They don't have a card to play. Right now, they're bluffing, and everybody knows they're bluffing, right? So From the very beginning, the Russians said, we need to talk to the US. We're not worried about the Europeans. They mean nothing to us. They got nothing. This is about the US. That's who has the horsepower. Let me tell you why. People talk about discuss uh, um, the British Empire, right? Oh, the British Empire, this and that, and I do. Then they use the U.S. for muscle, but when it comes down to it, all they got is a lot of talk. All they got is a lot of intelligence machinations. They think they're James Bond, but when it comes down to it, and this is what the Russians understand: the United States have some military horsepower and some economic horsepower. The Brits don't. The French don't. The coalition of willing ain't got nothing. When it comes down to it, when we get down and it's ready to fight, the U.S. can fight. They can't. So that's what they're like. Hey, you know what? U.S. can fight, they can't. So why would we talk to them? And now we have returned to where, sorry about that, my stupid phone. We have returned to where the Russians started in the beginning. And where the Russians started was, we can't talk to somebody who don't have horsepower. And one other thing, recall what the Russians said. They said that in the end, the elites in Europe are a bunch of scumbags, and you can't deal with these people. But I think in the long run, there'll be a different set of elites, and I think that's the opposite direction we're going. So let's get to it. So this is where we are. Let's get to what I'm talking about. Where we are now is the Americans are different than the Europeans in that, yeah, the Blinkens, the Bidens, the neoliberal types will live in a fantasy land, and they'll pretend that the Ukrainians can win, right? From the very beginning, I think Trump and Vance and their ilk, they knew the truth. Remember what Trump used to say? Well, the Russians, remember what Trump said this: the Russians are a machine. They defeated Hitler. They defeated Napoleon. He came to, look, this is the Red Army. If you think you're going to beat them, let's be honest about this. Ukraine ain't beating the Red Army. Trump, went back and forth a little bit, but he knew the truth. He knew the truth from the very beginning. And he tried to say, you better take a deal. And he told Trump many times, you better take a deal. Did he have to struggle? Sure. And fight back and forth with his people. But I believe, based on the things that Trump said, he always knew the truth. And now, and I think apparently there was meetings with him and Zelensky, and Zelensky had these maps. Here's a map to show you what and apparently there was screaming and yelling that Trump threw the maps. Basically, don't hand me this map bullshit. Your ass is getting kicked. Don't hand me this stuff. You're losing. I don't want to see your maps. I'm tired of your narratives. You're losing on the battlefield. You may be winning on that map, but you're losing on the battlefield, right? And so now we get to this. The Trump team has put together this 28-point thing. But even then, J.D. Vance says it has to be acceptable to the Russians and the Ukrainians. Well, that ain't going to happen, right? But at least he says it has to be acceptable to the Russians. If you understand that the Russians are winning, you understand that you cannot force something on them. I mean, if you look at the 28-point peace plan, as it were, it still presupposes that the United States has the horsepower to say, this is the way it's going to happen, that the U.S. is in charge and they're saying, all right, Russia, you got to do this. And in Ukraine, you have to do that, right? But there's something else going here that demonstrates that the U.S. That U.S. hegemony is gone. Realistically, think about this: that the U.S. ain't got the horsepower anymore because, okay, the U.S. says, Russia, you have to do this. You got to take this because we're the U.S. And the Russians are saying, nah, we're willing to talk to you about this. We ain't taking this deal. So the Russians say, no, we don't accept your hegemony. But what else is happening that is even more critical? The Ukrainians are like, well, a lot of Ukrainians, we will not give up our dignity, right? And the EU, well, no, we're not going to take this. So if the U.S. is a hegemon, it's one thing for another world power like Russia to say, we're not going to listen to you. But even their own weak, spiny, pencil-necked, lily-livered, jelly-spined puppets in Europe are now looking the American hegemon in the face saying no. Even them, the people who have the spine of these spineless creatures who are nothing. I think it's important to understand that Starmer and Macron And marriage, these people are nothing. They're hated by their own people. But they're looking at the U.S. hegemon saying, you can't tell us what to do. That's another indication that the U.S. hegemon ain't a hegemon anymore. Nobody's listening to you. You say to China and India, you better stop buying oil. And China and India says, nah, we ain't going to do that. You say to Iran, you better stop building, stop with your nuclear program. And Iran says, we ain't stopping. Make us. You can't make us. You say to Russians, you better back off and freeze along the line. Nah. And then you say to your jellyfish spine puppets, all right, guys, then here's a deal. You have to take it. And even your jellyfish puppets say, we ain't doing that. This business of hegemony is officially deceased. It's like Ukraine. It's a corpse. The corpse of U.S. hegemony is now trying to apply itself in Europe, and you can't even make the puppets do something anymore. The puppets are even bucking up on you, pushing back. That's a sad state of affairs. And here's where we go. Here's where we are. We know, and as indicated by clearly by Vance, he knows. He's saying we are not hegemonic. In saying it has to be acceptable to Russia. He knows what Ukraine is. It has to be acceptable to Russia. What he's saying is this: we can't force a deal, man. Europe, yeah, I know you want us to try to pretend like we're going to force a deal on Russia, man. We can't do this. We can't force a deal on Russia. And I got to add this. The motivation here is the U.S. knows that a cataclysmic, catastrophic loss is on the near horizon. They're like, look, guys, this crap's about to go bad. Do you recall what happened at Bagram Air Base? You remember what happened in what was the air base in Kabul, where planes are taking off? People are dangling from the fuselage, dropping when they're 20,000 feet in the air as the plane takes off. No, don't let me go. Ah, bloop. We can't go through that. Helicopters taking off from Saigon, from the embassy, people dangling, screaming, get me out of here because I'm a traitor. I work with the Americans. You got to get me out of here. They're going to kill me. You remember that? So the reality is the U.S. understands. There we go in Kabul. The U.S. understands what's on the near horizon here. This thing's get ready to collapse. And what Trump and J.D. Vance are saying, and rightfully so, I have my issues with them, but they're not stupid. Let's look at it from the perspective of geopolitics. Rightfully so, Vance and Trump are saying, we don't want to take an L like this, man. We got to try to back out of this thing while we can. We got to try to shake hands with the Russians and pretend that we didn't lose. We'll say it was a peace deal that was acceptable to Russia. Let's pretend like we didn't lose. That's what they're saying. Look, I know we lost. You know we lost. Everybody knows we lost. But the Russians are gentlemen. The Russians are gentlemen. And, hey, man, if we shake hands with the Russians and everybody goes their separate ways, and then we say to the Russians, hey, how about we make a deal on some, I don't know what the hell ever, mining, drilling in the Arctic, whatever. We make some kind of deal with the Russians. It looks even better. It looks like, hey, we iron this thing over and we made it work out so we could have some economic advantage for ourselves, not over the Russians, but we worked a deal. We didn't lose to the Russians. In fact, we smoothed this thing over for the better, and now we're all going. Everybody's going to benefit, right? And you can tie the economic benefits together with this catastrophic defeat and call it something else and walk away. That's the plan. To walk away without acknowledging the reality of the catastrophic defeat for NATO. That's what and I got to say this, just from reality here. It would be a smart move if they could get away with that. The Europeans ain't that smart. The Europeans are what the Russians know. The Russians know that the Europeans are not rational and they don't act in good faith. We're at a point now where the Trump administration, now you look at the 28-point plan and pick at the pieces. But I'm just saying, based on my interpretation of J.D. Vance's statement, you can say that at least he's rational. He's living in the real world. He's not living in the fantasy world. Come on, guys. Let's be real here. Let's end this thing. Let's get the hell out of here. Let's ask the Russians what they want. Let's shake hands as best we can and walk on, right? And then we can all eat. We're trying to make money. At least we can move in that direction. Dude, with $38 trillion in debt, we got problems. We're paying $1 trillion a year just servicing the debt. This is going bad for us. We need a way out. It ain't getting no better. So let's do this. So it's rational. The Trump policy, is rational. That's all it is. The trying to take the Russians out on their own border were never rational, but trying to get out like this is rational. That's all it is. I'm not saying they can, they will or won't. They're smart, they're not. It's just rational to try to escape, get out with your hide while you can, right? But here's the issue. This is the reality of where we are. Okay, let me get to the end. Where we are is the U.S. now has to make a decision of how they're going to deal with Europe, because here's what has happened. The U.S., the Trump on many instances has tried this game. Hey, here's the deal. Can we get a deal? Here's an offer. Can we work with the Russians on this? And Europe would say, nope. Here's an alternative plan. The Russians lose. And Trump would say, but the Russians are winning. So can we work on a deal from Istanbul Plus, from the perspective in the context that the Russians are winning and we're going to have to lean in their direction to give them a deal or they're going to take everything. And Europe, nope. We operate in a reality, in a narrative that the Russians don't get a say. And let me just say this. I think part of that is the European racism against the Russians. They're below us. They're lower than us. They never can. The Russians are below us. These people are inferior, intellectually inferior. They're genetically inferior. They don't get a say. We are not amused. They should be. They should be happy that we suffer the effrontery of their existence. That's where these cocky ruling elite are. They feel the same way about their own people. So the political class is like the Russians get a say. Oh, please, we are not amused, right? And the Americans are like, yeah, they got artillery and they're kicking your ass. We ain't amused either, but we're trying to get out of this without being humiliated. Can we get this done? And so here's where we are. This is it. The Americans are saying, let's work with the Russians. We got something going on here. We need to talk with the Russians. We need to end this. We need to end this on the Russians' terms as best we can. Maybe we'll get a little something out of it. The Russians are willing to bend. They've said they're willing to bend, but we gonna have to give them some things. Ain't no way about it. We're gonna have to give them. Let's do this. Let's acknowledge reality as best we can and see if we can get something to get out of here, right? And the Europeans' position is we're staying with the narrative. So here's what happens. In the past, when the Trump people did this and the Europeans said, go pound sand, what would happen? Trump would say, let's work with the Russians and get a deal. Europeans would say, no, we have an alternative deal. The Russians have to take whatever we give them, and we're not even going to acknowledge that they're winning. And what would Trump do? He would back down. The Trump administration would back down, and they would say, look, we'll put more sanctions and stuff on the Russians and force them to the table. And the Europeans would say, ha, 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 we won again. But that game ain't playing. As they say, that dog don't hunt no more. There's a reality on the battlefield. There was if I can find it, there was apparently, if I can find it, the United States is making it clear to Europe that today's proposal to resolve the conflict in Ukraine is the best Zelensky can achieve in the current situation. If Kiev rejects Washington's proposal, the next one will be much worse. The Financial Times. Oh, it'll be worse. All right. It will include artillery. Again, the day before, the American delegation held talks with representatives of European countries at the residence of Julie Davis, the U.S. charge d'affaires in Ukraine. The topic was the Trump peace plan proposed by Zelensky. The meeting was tense and, as the senior European official described it, nauseating. In other words, the European representatives were very dissatisfied with the statements made by the head of the American delegation, U.S. Secretary of the Army, Daniel Driscoll. Now, here's what's interesting. When you send a military guy, you're not sending somebody to negotiate. That ain't what the military does. When they send the Secretary of the Army, it's no more Mr. Nice Guy. You're not sending a diplomat. This is not a diplomat. If you remember, if you ever saw the great movie Serenity, where this guy comes to the anti-hero Hal and says, we just want a deal, we can all walk away, and we want to do this diplomatically. And Hal says, if the Empire wanted to do it diplomatically, they wouldn't have sent an assassin, right? Come on, I'm supposed to believe you're here to get a deal and you're an assassin. If they wanted to get a deal, they wouldn't have sent an assassin. Here's my point. If the Trump administration was in the move for diplomacy, they wouldn't have sent a guy from the Army. A guy from the Army does not do diplomacy. The military does this. You ever listen to Scott Ritter? What does Scott Ritter say? He's a Marine. And what does he say? Close with and destroy the enemy. That's all he knows. What are you going to do? Close on and destroy the enemy. We will attack the enemy. We'll close with him and we'll smash him to pieces. That's what you're trained as a Marine. That's what Scott Ritter knows. People get mad at Scott Ritter. Scott, you got to be softer. He's a Marine. The Marines don't do soft. They get mad at me. I'm an ex-cop. I'm a former law enforcement officer. I don't understand the mushy stuff real well. You know what I mean? I don't understand the mushy stuff. I'm sorry. I don't understand where Scott's coming from. I like Predator. I like those kind of movies. I'll be back. Get to the chopper. That I understand. Predator. I love the Predator. He's my favorite guy. He doesn't do a lot of talking. He kicks butt and takes names, right? I ain't a diplomat. I don't understand diplomacy. And when they sent Driscoll, when they sent the Secretary of the Army, they didn't send him there to make a deal. They sent him there to punch somebody in the face. That's what the Army does. So let me continue. In other words, the European representatives were very dissatisfied with the statements made by the head of the American delegation, U.S. Secretary of the Army Daniel Driscoll. He made very simple points. Again, simple points. Why is that? When I used to do my radio show, we had our what do you call it? Our producer, a very sweet woman, and she would send stuff so if she wanted Scott Ritter to come on at 2:15 for an interview, she'd send something. Hey, Scott, good morning. Beautiful day. Really appreciate you coming on with us on a regular basis. Hey, Scott, would you be available at 2:15 for an interview about fill in the blank? That's the way she sent a message to Scott because she was a sweet little manager, the producer person. This is what I did. I sent a message to Scott. Scott, interview, 2:15, question mark. Scott would send back, unavailable, 2:30. I'd send back, 2:30 works. That's it. That's how me and Scott communicated when I wanted him on. It wasn't, good morning, Scott. Hey, bro, how you doing, man? What's happening? High five. Me and Scott are the best of friends, but he's a Marine. I'm a cop. You available? 2:15, interview. Nope, 2:30. Busy, 2:30, question mark. 2:30, confirmed. Boom, that's it. That was that's the way it is. So this guy, that's why it says the military. He made very simple points. That's what military guys do. The United States believes the time has come to undertake peace efforts to end the conflict. And the plan proposed by the United States is the best proposal so far. Now, you notice they don't say it's the only proposal. It goes back to what J.D. Vance says. It's got to be approved by the Russians. So let's push the things aside in the 28 points. When he says it's got to be approved by the Russians, it shows that he says, forget this fantasy stuff. It shows he's real. And what does this military guy say? The time has come to undertake peace efforts to end the conflict. And the plan proposed by the United States is the best proposal so far. This is what a military guy says. The situation will only get worse. That's what Driscoll says. Man, here we are. Let's do this. It ain't going to get better than this. That's what a military guy is there to do. I respect that. If I were the president, if I needed somebody to fluff it up, I'd send a diplomat, go over there and, wax philosophical, give them historical context, shake some hands, share some drinks, give them some hors d'oeuvres, try to convince them. If I needed something done, Major so-and-so, yeah. Sergeant Major, I may send a drill sergeant or Sergeant Major. Sergeant Major, yeah. Here are your instructions. Go over there, tell those bastards do what I tell them to do, or else. You know what the military guy is going to say? Sir, yes, sir. General Driscoll reporting for duty, sir. You go tell these sons of bitches. They better shut the hell up and take this deal. General Driscoll, yes, sir. And that's it. And Driscoll's going to go over there. Now, this is my favorite line. I'm going to read my favorite line. At the same time, as Europeans point out, Driscoll expressed himself very harshly, sometimes using obscene language. In other words, Driscoll went in and said, you mofos, you Matthew Fergusons, let me tell you something. We ain't playing with you no more. I don't care if you get your panties in a bunch. We ain't playing with you no more. Thing's over. Now, I love that. I think it's so hilarious. I love that. Now, here's my point. Notwithstanding all the holes in the 28-point peace plan, as long as J.D. Vance acknowledges it has to be approved by the Russians, that's good because it shows that, okay, they're in the right mode. They understand who's won, number one. Number two, they send a military guy. That means they're putting the foot down. That gets me to number three. And that gets me to that gets me to where I've been driving all along, right? That's this. Let's say for the sake of, okay, I'm going to, I love to use analogies, right? This is the crescendo that we're here. We're here, and I'm going to use my dad as always, and I'm going to give you the analogy, and then I'm going to give you the final reality that we're facing, that this video is all about. Trump would say, here's a deal. Let's go to the Russians and finish this and put a bow on this and sign it. And we got to do it. It's time. And the Russians and Ukrainians would say no. And what would Trump do time after time after time? They would say, no, we got to crack down on the Russians and force them to the table. And Trump would go, okay, we're doing more sanctions, 500%, this and that, bone crushing sanctions. He would go along with them. Every single time he'd say, you have to do what I tell you. And they would say, no. And not only are we not going to do what I tell you, you're going to go along with what we've got to tell you. And Trump would say, yes, right? This is the analogy. My dad says, Garland, go out and cut the grass. No, Dad, I'm not cutting the grass. And not only that, give me my allowance. And then my dad would say, all right, Dad, all right, Garland, here's your allowance. Trust me when I tell you this, my dad was a longshoreman. He was a dock worker. It would have never crossed my mind to say no. It would be more like military. Garland, go cut the grass. Sir, yes, sir. Corporal Nixon reporting for duty, sir. I will cut the grass right away. Now, that's what you said to my dad. You didn't say no because I feared that those were the last words that would ever come out of my mouth. Okay? As you can tell, I'm a disciplined guy. What would your dad beat you? He didn't have to. He just looked at me. Yeah, Dad, I'll get the copy out there cutting the grass. He never had to lay a finger on me because I feared death. I feared a horrific death. So the fear of a horrific death at the hands of my dad, who was a longshoreman, who lifted boxes and things and big, heavy stuff. He looked like a freaking gorilla. Right? You don't want to mess with this guy. You're in horror, right? But imagine if I said no and my dad said, all right, you don't have to do it. Here's your umbrella. That was Trump. You got to go take this deal. No, we're not taking the deal, Trump. And not only that, you're going to have to put more sanctions on Russia. Okay, I'll do it over and over and over. Here we come to a point, an inflection point, as it were. Here's where we are. Now the Trump team is coming down saying, guys and girls, game's up. The jig is up. It's all over. We can't play Fantasyland anymore. We can't do all of this stuff. Why? Because we take the heat. Because if the Russians bash this thing to pieces, and just before the midterms start, there's people in Kiev jumping on the edge of helicopters and dangling off fuselages, just like Bagram Air Force Base, just like Kabul, after we denigrated, attacked, and berated Biden for this debacle. And we get a bigger debacle that makes that look like nothing. If we get something that makes Vietnam and the people at the embassy in Saigon and the Bagram, that makes that look like peanuts, and we got to eat that. We're not here to do that, bruh. That's not how we're ready to operate just before the midterms. Ain't happening. We'd rather be the champs that walked away with a deal and started pumping oil with the Russians. Here's my point. So now the U.S. has said to Europe, go out and cut the grass. They've given them their orders. They called him daddy, didn't they? Daddy, daddy, daddy. Trump's daddy. That's why I use the analogy of my dad. Daddy. Oh, dad, daddy. They kissing his butt. Okay. So daddy has said, look, you got to cut the grass, brother. I know you got your friends are out there. The kids are up the street at the basketball court. The other kids are down the other end of the street at the skateboard park. Oh, it's a beautiful day. You got all these things to do. You got to cut the grass. You have to do what I tell you to do. Do it now. And Europe is saying no. Just like we've always told you, no, Dad, we'll do what we want. What? You think you got a plan? We'll give you a plan. And you know what our plan is going to be? Same plan we gave you before. We're going to come up with an alternative plan, the coalition of the willing. What's it going to be? Hold on a minute. And they're like, hey, remember that stupid plan that we wrote 6 months ago? Yeah, just go recopy it and put a new date on it. Yeah, you got it? Okay, yeah, here you go. Here you go, Trump. The Russian surrender. That's the plan. That's it. Okay. Here's the question. Only thing that matters. What's Trump going to do? Not Trump. I'm saying Trump. What is the United States empire? What is the administration that is in charge? And I tend to feel the way things are going on with the warring factions going on right now, at least regarding Ukraine, the faction of J.D. Vance that wants to get the hell out for whatever reason. It could be something diabolical. It could be they want a war somewhere else. I'm not going to say why, but it's obvious they want out. That faction has won, and Keith Kellogg's ass is out on the street. And it's Keith, we're sick of this bull crap. You're out of here. He's done. That is the indicator that you get. Kellogg's out, his people lost, and the other people won, and he's been cast into the abyss, right? He's out. Done. We're finished. We don't need to hear how the Russians are losing anymore. I'm sorry. We're kind of can see that they weren't. So what happens? You cast Kellogg out. You then what's the word I'm going to look for? You then destabilize the Kiev regime by going after them for corruption and putting all of this stuff out. So you've destabilized, you've cast Kellogg into the lake of fire. You have destabilized the Kiev regime. No doubt you've threatened the heck out of Zelensky. Zelensky, you know, we got a lot of evidence on the stuff you've done wrong. Be ashamed for all of that to come out, wouldn't it? It could have been worse threats, but you get my point. And now you've laid it on the line. And you have said to the Europeans, you got to take this deal. Now, I know, we all know the Europeans are going to say no. They're not rational actors. And of course, they've laid everything on the line. So the Europeans are going to go, you can't tell us what to do. We'll keep fighting. The Russians won't win. Why? We've got to push Putin or put Putin. We're not the Ukrainians have their dignity. You hear Ukrainians talking about dignity. The good news, we got good news and bad news. The good news is you can maintain your dignity. The bad news is you're going to lose your country. And Trump apparently told him last week, you're going to lose your country. Apparently, he told within the last few weeks, said to Zelensky, you better take this deal or you're going to lose your country. And apparently, Zelensky said no. Now, keep in mind something. Zelensky has no agency. He can't say yes. There is no such thing as Zelensky. Look. If I take a puppet and I put a hand puppet on, I go, oh, Zelensky, right? That's me talking. If I take that puppet off and throw it on the table, it ain't going to talk. It's a hand puppet. It's some felt and cloth and yarn. It's got buttons for eyes. It ain't talking. That's Zelensky. Zelensky has no agency. So the idea that you're going to Zelensky and he's saying yes or no is nothing but an MI6 creation. He doesn't have the agency to say yes or no. And of course, MI6 will never say no because that's the end. When they say, we'll never say yes. This is it. So now, this is an inflection point that's been 50 years coming. Ever since the U.S. and the British had their little squabble in 1776, right? I believe that to some extent, the Brits were powerful. They ruled the waves. Britannia ruled the waves, blah, 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 blah. Then they kind of fell apart, shall we say, in the Suez Canal. And The U.S., like you ever heard that song? You got the brains, I got the brawn. Well, let's make some money. Well, that's where the U.S., where the Brits were. We got the brains, we got all of this stuff. We know how to do all of this intelligent stuff all over the world. And the U.S. will come in and smash things to pieces. They're the gorillas, right? And now, after all of that, the U.S., for whatever reason, is saying we no more. Well, the U.S. is broke. It's not working for the U.S. Let's start here. It ain't working for the U.S. And the U.S. is saying it ain't working for us. Okay. So now, this is an interesting time, this Thursday or whatever, right? When Trump said Zelensky has to say something by Thursday. And what it really means is basically the British Crown has to say something by Thursday. And we already know what they're going to say. No. I see no way around that. Because at that point, if they say yes, then they have admitted defeat. If they say yes, then a couple of things happen. There's a bomb with a long fuse floating around, and that bomb is Nord Stream. If they say yes, at that point, people are going to start saying, why do we make these sacrifices? And what the hell happened to Nord Stream? And the war's over, people will have a lot of questions. Well, we're told that the Russians were going to continue to Poland and the Baltic states and head for everything we've been told was a lie. At that point, realistically, to some extent, you're looking at a collapse of the political class in Europe. So the Europeans really can't say yes, but they really can't say no. So they're going to say no. And the only thing that matters is when Trump said do this and they said no, we have to sanction Putin more. Trump would say, okay, we'll push Putin to the table. Now what Trump is saying is what he said before. He's saying, and I'm saying Trump, I mean the collective Trump, the U.S. empire. They're saying, if you don't take this deal, we're walking. Will they walk this time? They have to walk. They have to walk. And Trump says, and we'll do some sanctions. Well, we'll sanction Russia or both sides or something. What are you going to sanction? In fact, was it Trump or J.D. Vance? No, excuse me. It was Rubio recently, and this was a giveaway. Rubio said, we sanctioned everything. There's nothing left to sanction. Rubio also said, why should we send them more air defense systems when they get blown up in a week? It was an acknowledgement. Number one, the sanctions war has failed. Number two, providing weaponry to the Nazis, it's folly. It's over. We send them more weapons. It's going to give that. We ain't send them no more of this stuff. Now, apparently, it has been stated or implied by the Trump administration, not only are we not going to sell weapons, we ain't going to provide them with intel, and we're not going to sell weapons to the Europeans to go there. Apparently, they're saying to the Europeans, we will not sell you weapons. You want to arm them? You do it yourself. Take it or leave it. Now, here's the question. Can the Trump administration hold up? Part of me says this: Trump can't hold up. He's got to buckle again simply because of the pressure that he's going to have on him internally. But part of me says this: the game is up. The jig is up. The Russians are surrounding, everything and are surrounding battalion after battalion. The cauldrons are forming. That Trump can't say, you ever heard the saying, you got a tiger by the tail, you can't hold on and you can't let go. Oh, geez, I almost knocked my light over. Trump can't say, okay, I'll go along with you. I'm going to keep arming, or I'll keep going along with the war because he knows it's over and there's within weeks. And if he continues to try to pretend like he's going to fight the war, he takes the full loss. He takes the complete brunt of the loss. He's trying to blunt that off. He doesn't want to take a solid hit, right? If he says, okay, we're walking away, he knows that the Europeans and everybody are going to say, oh, they'd have won if you hadn't walked away. But here's the thing. He's got to make a choice. Some point you got to make a choice. And the choice becomes, if I got two bad choices, do I take the lesser of two evils or do I take the evil of two lessers, right? In this instance, I take the evil of two lessers. And I say, look, I got to say this, Europeans. I don't want you to blame me, but I'd rather have you blame me than the circumstance blame me. So I think Trump really, maybe I'm wrong. I'm just going to go with this. I think the decision has been made in Washington, and I think the decision is we're out of here. That's what I think the decision is, that we can't do it anymore. We don't have the money. We're running out of weapons. If we send them weapons, they get blown up. We can't pretend anymore, and we got weeks. And might I ask, if you look at what's happening in Kiev, the rats are jumping off the sinking ship. I've been reading that apparently, let me look. I've been reading that there are a lot of money that people in Kiev are running, that people are bagging up their money. If you recall, let me go to my YouTube channel and go back to what I predicted years ago. What was it called? Let me show you something. This was 2 years ago. Not to blow my own horn or not blow my own horn. What the hell difference does that make? I want you to look at something that Garland Nixon predicted 2 years ago. This was it, 2 years ago. Neocons prepare to flee Ukraine. The Samsonite option, right? 2 years ago. What did I say? How did this end? Rats jumping off a sinking ship. That when this thing ends, people were like, there will be a clash between the United States and then we'll have World War III. I said, United States, perhaps you don't understand how the United States does things. There's a reason they use proxies, because the proxies are expendable assets. The United States ain't going to lose one soldier for Ukraine. They don't give a damn about the Ukrainians. I'll go one further. The Russians could invade the Baltic states and blow them to smithereens and kill everybody in them. Poland too. United States would say, oh man, that sucks. We got your back. We'll send you some air defense systems or something. They wouldn't lose a soldier for them. You think the United States is going to trade Chicago for Vilnius with a nuclear bomb? No. Europe, that's not going to happen. It's called the Samsonite option for a reason, in my opinion. I came up with that because I'm like this. They're going to pack their bags and get the hell out. And what's happening in Kiev right now? Those rotten, thieving scumbags have stolen everything they can. They've stolen everything that they ain't nailed down. Then they went back and stole the nails. They're packing them in their bags. And my understanding is the rich people who are driving around Kiev in Lamborghinis and McLarens, they're heading out. They're heading for a bunch of them for Israel. They're heading for wherever they can. They are heading for Miami. They are packing up their dollars and they are getting them and they're leaving. So even if the Europeans want to prop up the Kiev regime, there ain't going to be nothing left to prop up. It's all over. I made this point. This thing, I said it this way, and I'll say it again for those who didn't hear me. The Russians understand that if there's some kind of a military and some kind of a political entity left, that the West, the neocons, will try to prop it up. So what the Russians are going to do is they're going to bash it to pieces. So when they get finished, there ain't nothing to prop up. There ain't nothing to fix. There ain't nothing to paint. There ain't nothing to put dipstick on. There's nothing. There's just ashes. There's nothing that you can fix or save. That's where they're going. And that's what they're doing bit by bit. And at this point, you know, the Russians aren't even in a hurry. See, if I'm the Russians right now, if I could wrap this thing up in 2 weeks, I don't want to. I want to, because you're putting pressure on the Ukrainians, but you're letting this thing fall apart in Kiev. You let it fall apart. Let that thing dissipate, because it's going to trickle down. Very shortly, the soldiers on the lines are going to say, what are we doing out here fighting? We don't have, hey, I'm going to call Kiev. Let me call headquarters and see what I get. Hello, headquarters. Hello, headquarters. I'm sorry, the party that you're calling has absconded from the country with $457 million in untraceable, non-sequential American bills. Thank you. Please call again. And you're on the front lines. Can you send help? I'm sorry. The number you're calling has been disconnected. That's what you're going to get when you call in the headquarters. I'm sorry, you're porked, screwed, blued, and tattooed. Best of luck with that. So that's where we are. The rats are jumping off the sinking ship. The U.S. now has no qualms with Russia. Russia made it clear, hey, man, we'll talk with you. Anytime you want, we're ready to talk. And now the Americans are like, okay, you won. That's reasonable. Let's talk. So the Americans are acting in a rational manner. Look, there was a fight. You won. Let's clean this thing up. The Russians are acting in a rational manner. Hey, man, no hard feelings. You know, we had a fight. You gave it a shot. Didn't work. Let's get this done. Excellent. Two rational actors trying to iron it out. Do the Russians trust the Americans? Well, of course not. No, I mean, historically, no, they don't trust them, but they got the upper hand so they can work a deal that works for them. But meanwhile, all the Russians got to do is get out of the way. Americans, we tried to toll you, cuz. I used to know a guy that was from South, down South, and that's what he'd say. I tried to toll you, cuz. I tried to told you. Right? That was his, I tried to tell you. I've never heard anybody say that before instead of I tried to tell you, right? It's hilarious the way he had this Southern accent that I thought was so hilarious. It was funny. And that's what the Russians are going to do. They're going to look at Trump and Vance. And Trump and Vance, these people are idiots. And Putin's going to say, tried to tell you, cuz. I tried to tell you. Merits, Macron, these guys, and Trump's gonna go, yeah, jeez. Handle them, man. Handle them. And Trump's gonna have to handle them. It's all it is. And how he does it, I think there's only one out for the Trump administration, to me. Send Driscoll. From now on, Trump, don't go meet with him. Vance, don't go meet with Macron. Say, we'd like a meeting with Mertz, Macron, and Starmer. We need a meeting. And you can have Zelensky there, bring the mop bucket, give him a mop bucket. If you bring him, we need somebody to serve the drinks. We need a shoe shine boy. Give him a shoe shine kit. And so you guys can bring and give our boy a shoe shine kit. So while men and women, while the adults are in the room getting something done, he can shine our shoes because that's all he's good for us. He's a shoe shine boy. We know it. You know it. Let's not pretend he's anything else. And he's not getting a tip. And send Driscoll. Say, yeah, Mertz and Macron and you guys, coalition of the willing. Trump's kind of busy. Vance, he can't make it. Rubio, Snubio, Smubio, all of them, they're all busy. We're going to send Driscoll. Send Driscoll in the room. I think he knows how to talk to him. We're going to send our army guy. Let me tell you something, you stupid, ignorant lunatics. Curse him, use foul language at him, denigrate him, humiliate him, tell him you've had it up to here with them and you ain't playing this game no more. Tell him, I will tariff you so many tariffs like you've never, Trump, you've never seen the kind of tariffs I'll put on you before. I've talked to President Trump. I talked to Daddy, and Daddy sent a message. And the message is, the jig is up. No more. Now, if you do this, I mean, whatever you want to threaten them with, 50% tariff, whatever. Don't call us. You're not getting any money. By the way, we're going to start withdrawing our troops from Israel. Oh, there is a weird file, something about you and you knowing about Nord Stream and signing off on it. And it's weird, but the CIA taped it. So here's what we may end up releasing some information about money that you sons of bitches stole, about the plots that you did against your own people. I'm just saying. Things like that could be released. That's the game you have to play. I'm sorry. That's the game you have to play when you're on that level. You got to threaten them. You got to say, Mertz. Oh, by the way, remember that little bag you wrinkled up on that train? Yeah, we know what was in it. And, we were, all of your phones were tapped. Starmer, we understand why those Ukrainian male escorts were burning your homes down and burning your cars. You know, we got some very interesting videotapes. It'd be a shame if they got out. We don't want them to get out. You don't want them to get out. I mean, that's the game Driscoll should be sent to play. So I'm just saying, we think you're going to take the deal. It's in the best interest of everybody to take the deal. Take the deal. Have a nice day. If you don't take the deal, I think you see the direction things are going. But you know, Daddy has told me that he has confidence that you guys are very reasonable. I think that's the game you got to play. And we shall see what happens. Me, I'm a nice guy. You watch my videos. People that know me know I'm an easygoing person. I'm a man of peace, of love for all human beings. I got nothing against anybody. There are some people that don't like gay people. I got nothing against gay people, gay or trans people. I'm not into this whole, you know, we all got to be running around with pride flags and crap like that. No. I just say gay people, trans, leave them alone, let them live their lives. Stay, you know, you do what you want to do, and you're consenting adults. That's the key word, consenting adults. I don't want to know. I got nothing against anybody of any race, anybody of any creed, anybody of any religion. No, I'm an easygoing, nice person. I just want kindness and love. Let's enjoy the arts. Let's enjoy our music and our opera. Let's enjoy great cuisine. Let's dance. Let's have fun together. That's me. I'm a nice guy. When it comes down to it, sometimes you got to put your foot in somebody's ass. And it's time for the Trump administration. I don't know if they're going to do it, but it's time for them to meet with these idiots in Europe and to stomp them into the ground. At some point, you got to determine who's, you know, I didn't, in law enforcement, I was a major. I was a commissioned officer. I didn't become a major just because I was always a nice guy. I understood that there are times when you got to be the alpha male. The United States has to establish with Europe that they're the alpha. Whether or not Trump's going to do it, I don't know. But we shall see. And that's where we are. The question of the day, to put exclamation mark on this video, the question of the day is when the Trump administration says to these flunkies in Europe, listen, you got to take the deal. We got to talk with Russia. I got a 28-point plan. We're written it down, but you understand what J.D. Vance said. We can't do anything that's not approved by Russia. Let's call Russia and say, okay, we've signed on, and we understand you're winning. What parts of this thing can you not work with? We need to rewrite them. We know we can't do anything that you don't approve. Can you stop killing all the Ukrainians? Perhaps. How about that? This is what we got to do. We got to call the Russians and we got to say, you won, man. You won. No hard feelings. We fought like men. You won this one. Steak. What do we need to do? It's over, right? That's what they need to do because they understand that the Russians, somebody said, never trust Yankees. They understand that the Russians don't have any trust, that the Russians have been had too many times. And if you get a deal with the Russians, it ain't going to be pretty. And they keep saying, dude, ain't no deal gonna get better. So when they say no, they've already tell. In a way, I think this: if I know that they're going to say no, and you know they're going to say no, the Trump team knows they're going to say no, and they've already come to this point. They've already said this is what we got to do. So when they said the next deal ain't going to get better, I think they understand the next deal is not going to be a Trump's 28-point plan because this is going to be rejected by the Europeans. It's going to be Vladimir Putin's 28-point plan. It ain't going to be 28 points. It's going to be one. It's my butt. It's going to be one plan. You see this thing that says unconditional surrender right here? We need you to sign. And you don't have to sign it. As the Russians said, I tell you what it goes back to. I remember, end with this. I remember at the very beginning of this conflict that there was a phone call or a meeting, I don't remember which one, between Emmanuel Macron and Putin. And President Putin said, we will achieve the goals of the special military option, either by diplomacy or force of arms. What Trump is saying is they've already achieved it. They've already demonstrated that they can achieve it by force of arms. Let's finish it off with diplomacy. The Russians ain't going to trust them. So the deal is going to be real ugly. You know that it's going to be real ugly. And I also think the Trump team is preparing them, saying, look, it's going to be real ugly if you don't take this. We know you ain't going to take it. But the next go around, when you get that unconditional surrender and we get that unconditional surrender, we're going to say we tried to tell you to take the deal. Remember, Trump told Zelensky, take the deal or you're going to lose your country. I think that next goes to the scumbags in Europe. Take the deal. And here's what else it means. Leslie, if you think that you ain't going to take this deal, the Russians are going to overrun the Ukrainians, and you're going to call us to come in and fight, yeah, you got another thing coming. We ain't calling you. And so we'll see. Well, that's a good hour. I've run my mouth long enough. Thanks a lot, everybody. I certainly appreciate everybody taking out all of their time to spend an hour with me and discuss this most important issue. Of course, I want to thank all my Patreon people who help keep this channel going. As you know, I'm a retired cop. I ain't making a fortune. I'm not a rich man by any stretch of the imagination. And it's the people that donate through Patreon, PayPal, Buy Me a Coffee, Cash App, etc., are the ones that allow me to be able to do this. Because if they didn't do that, I'd have to go out and get a job. I guess I'd be driving a trash truck. I don't know what the heck I'm doing. Go back to teaching at the college, but that don't pay enough. Driving a trash truck probably pays more than teaching at the college. By the way, if you can, I also gave my P.O. box. So if you can donate at the P.O. box, but also you can email there. You can mail a note that says, hey, Garland, this is what I was thinking. You can mail, people send me great books. I've gotten great books, fantastic books. Magazines, you name it, it's fantastic. I can't believe some of the books people send me, new books that come out. So anything that you can do that you want to send snail mail, there's my P.O. box down at the bottom. The most important thing you can do is share this on all your social media platforms. I'm out.